Well, you knew we needed to talk about it eventually. Today we're going over the big rumor that has taken over the Vancouver Canucks social media world, and it's one that I find absolutely ridiculous. Now, our source comes from the Rumor Boys segment on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast. They posted themselves a clip yesterday on Instagram talking about how the Rumor Boys are dropping a bomb on today's game notes. Attached is an Instagram reel where you had yourselves one Matt Murley go out there and share some rumors that he has been sort of hearing about, or things that he could see happening. Matt Murley, if you are familiar, is a former NHL player. He did play with the Penguins like 20 years ago, back in the mid-2000s. He was there in Pittsburgh, he was in Arizona, or Phoenix, before making his way actually over to the European leagues and eventually the Asian League, which was awesome. He played for Damyoung, actually, which is really impressive, before going over to the Swedish league once again. But either way, Matt Murley is the guest on the podcast, where he goes out there and talks about a few names that he feels could be going to the Chicago Blackhawks. And based off the title, you already know who it is we're talking about. Elias Pettersson is the main name mentioned here. And look, the response on the show, you've got the other Chicklets guys, Colby Armstrong is on for some reason, and they react and respond. They ask a few questions. Hey, you could really see that happening? And Murley is like, yeah, like the Blackhawks, they have the cap space, and the intention would be for Pettersson to want to play with a guy like Connor Bedard, which is why he may find himself out of Vancouver. Now, there wasn't a definitive conclusion if you watch the clip, which will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to that yourself, but there isn't a definitive conclusion as to whether or not Murley indicates Pettersson would go to Chicago via a trade or via an offer sheet. He can't just up and away leave, he's an RFA, so the Vancouver Canucks, if they lose out on Petey, they would get some sort of a compensation, either via a trade or with an offer sheet compensation package. So there's a lot of extra elements that are not really talked about in the clip that you listen to, but I mean, Murley went out there and tossed the idea onto one of the biggest, if not the biggest, hockey podcasts on the planet. And as a result, you had social media set ablaze with Pettersson to Chicago rumors going out there and saying, yeah, he would want to play with Bedard, he'd want to sign there, they'd give him all the money he wants, and he's going to leave Vancouver, etc., etc. This is why I wanted to wait a little bit before making this video, because we did have some responses to this via guys like Elliotte Friedman. Take a look at this tweet made by Buck Foston, who usually goes out there and tweets out updates from the insiders. According to Elliotte Friedman, Matt Murley is not an idiot. He hears things. Friedman does think that the Pettersson conclusion about him going to Chicago is premature, though. The one person that can stop all of this is Pettersson himself. The Canucks have decided when Elias Pettersson is ready, they're going to throw a significantly sized bag of cash at him, one that might have trouble fitting in an SUV. They're waiting for Elias Pettersson. And another tweet from Buck Foston goes out there and says, yeah, Elliotte Friedman says he guarantees that Pettersson hates this rumor and all the other ones that are like it, which admittedly is not really that surprising when you consider just Pettersson's personality as a whole, how he is as a human being, as an interviewee, and his overall perception when it comes to things like this. The fact that now people are tossing his name out there in abandoning Vancouver rumors, literally leaving what is one of the best teams in the NHL for Chicago just to play with Bedard, like, it's kind of a mind-boggling thought process. Of course, if you were to say that Elias Pettersson only cares about the money, like, the biggest thing for him is that he gets his bag and nothing else, then okay, fine. Like, him going to Chicago to where they have cap space, that doesn't seem like too bad of a conclusion. Especially if he's going to play with Bedard, which I don't know how that worked because they're both centers, but I don't know, I guess the power play is the main avenue for that. But for Elias Pettersson himself, he has said over the years multiple times that he wants to play for a winning team. It's why he didn't sign in Vancouver right away. He wanted to make sure that the Vancouver Canucks would put themselves in a favorable position to win and thus give him a great opportunity to win. He wants to be a number one player on a winner. Chicago is not that. You know how many players Chicago has on their team? One, Connor Bedard. Everybody else is like not great. And having two players on your team, oh wow, Bedard and Pettersson together, not to mention the entire rest of the roster who can't really do anything, like, no disrespect of course to the Chicago Blackhawks, they're all NHL players, barely, but still, Pettersson and Bedard. Oh, we're already seeing what's happening in Edmonton. That team can't really win anything with 2 superstar players and a good cast around them. I mean, Evander Kane, Zach Hyman, Evan Bouchard, on some nights, they're not terrible. Chicago has an even worse core surrounding their number 1 superstar talent. So Elias Pettersson heading over to Chicago goes completely against his sentiment that he said earlier in the offseason that he wants to play for a winning team, and it's why he didn't want to sign in Vancouver right away, which was totally his prerogative. We said this multiple times, but Pettersson wanting to secure his future, that's fine. That's all within his hands, and it's all within his right. He has the opportunity to do that, and the Vancouver Canucks needed to show off that they were going to be an appropriate landing spot for him. Guess what? They have. They lost last night, I get that, but they're still tied for first in the NHL. This is a team with a good enough core with Petey, Brock, Miller, Hughes, and everybody around them, Dakota, Joshua, and Teddy Bluger, that if the Canucks ended up winning a few playoff rounds this season, I don't think anybody would be surprised at this point, considering they're number 1 in the NHL. I mean, if you told us that they'd be able to do that at the beginning of the year, okay, calm your horses there, folks. But Vancouver, they're good, and the way this team is assembled, they could very well keep up success into the next few years. Maybe not this amount of success. I don't think the Canucks are going to be number 1 in the NHL every Christmas for the next 5 years, but just being competitive and finding themselves in the postseason once in a while. No longer are the days in Vancouver where they're missing out on the playoffs year after year and not being bad enough to get a top pick. They had their top picks. 5th overall, 7th overall. That's all they needed. They got Petey, they got Hughes, they're good. And now, nobody in Vancouver cares about Macklin Celebrini anymore. They're not focused on him like they were on Bedard last year because the team was bad. This team is good. And now Elias Pettersson would be abandoning all of that to go to Chicago of all teams? No, thank you. Maybe if you get Celebrini and Bedard and then Elias Pettersson and then William Nylander, because the same clip on Spit and Chicklets goes out there and says that Nylander could go to Chicago. I mean, maybe things change there, but at the same time, Elias Pettersson would have to go through hoops and hurdles with an offer sheet or a trade in order to get to the Blackhawks in the first place. It makes no sense. It's not going to happen. And the fact that Elias Pettersson himself probably hates this rumor kind of is your conclusion right there. So, yeah, that's my opinion on the entire thing. I mean, if Elias Pettersson finds himself in Chicago next year, then I'll eat my hat. I'll go out there and say that I was wrong and that Matt Murley of the Spit and Chicklets podcast was 100% correct. But for now, I don't believe it. For now, I don't think this really has any truth to the matter. Like, I'll buy the Nylander stuff. We had actually made a video about Nylander going over to Chicago before. That's something that I don't think is all too unrealistic considering the Bedard circumstance and the fact that they have money and they could give him money and Nylander wants money because, you know, it kind of seems more apparent that he is in that boat than Elias Pettersson would be. But the Petey conversation? Nah, I don't know about that, man. He seems like too much of a good friend with Hughes and Besser anyway to abandon them, especially when the team has been winning as many games as they have been this year. Friedman has a point too. The guy that can end this entire thing and stop these rumors from percolating is Elias Pettersson. He's just got to sign as soon as he can. Come on, Petey, sign the deal. Let's give you $10 million, not 11, not 12, because I don't know if you're really worth that much anymore now, but yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Elias Pettersson contract situation, the updates that he may be going over to Chicago sometime soon, and whether or not you feel that would be most appropriate via a trade or an offer sheet. How much money do you think Pettersson gets on his next contract, and do you think it's going to be worth it? Does he stay or go as far as the Vancouver Canucks are concerned? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.